Welcome to the Catbird Quilts. I'm Kathy Martin. Today's video is about some of the challenges I've had while glue basting and what I've done to kind of work around those challenges and find solutions. And you know, I have a lot to say about it. So let's do it. So when I first heard about glue basting, I'll be honest, my first thought was, yuck, that sounds gross and like it won't work. And I'm ashamed to say my first reaction sometimes is one of scoffing. But I hate pin basting and I detest spray basting. And well, let's just face it, I don't like basting. I've never done thread basting. So maybe that's actually the holy grail of basting for me. But that's not what this is about. This is about glue basting seeming like yuck. But, you know, I always want to try. So I decided to give glue basting the college try. And so I watched a video by Miriam on Stitch Obsessed, and it was excellent and seemed very doable. And as a result of that, I'm not going to teach you how to glue baste. She can do that for you on that video. It's excellent. And she has a second video that has frequently asked questions. So both of those videos are excellent. And we'll link those in the description box if you want to go watch them. But like all things quilting, I had my own experience with it. And so it really started when I did all my things, which we'll get to, and I was using the glue and my hand got tired of using the little squeezy Elmer's glue. I don't know why. You would think twisting pill bottles all day at work that I would have excellent hand strength, but apparently not. So I thought, gosh, it seems like there's a better way. So that was really the springboard for this video. And in the process, I got to thinking about all of the questions that I had and all of the challenges that I had. And maybe you might benefit from some of my exploration. So we're going to start with the difference between pin basting and glue basting. So if you're unfamiliar, pin basting is taking your backing, your batting, and your quilt top and pinning them together, usually with safety pins. Doesn't have to be, but that's the safest way, which is why they call them safety pins. And quilter safety pins are curved ever so slightly so that you can get up under all of those layers and kind of pull back and have a little bit of success that way. Somewhere in my very early quilting journey, I'm still pretty early in my quilting journey, by the way, I read that your pins should be 2 to 4 inches apart. And of course, I took that as the gospel. And so that's what I did. And it just so happens that my 3 fingers are exactly 2 inches. And so how wonderful. I would just put my hand down, and if I needed that little extra, I would put my whole hand. So 2 to 4 inches. I had my own personal little measuring tape with me as I would sit on the floor and pin baste. And as you can see, I've started that process here. So what I did, this is 2 inches. I put a pin, 2 more, put a pin, 2 more. And then this is what I would kind of do if I was doing a whole quilt. I would go up a row by about that same distance and then put the pin kind of at a diagonal and then do 2 inches, 2 inches, 2 inches. So you can see how that has come together. And, you know, it's not awful. Yes, it is. It's awful. Mostly because, especially with a big quilt, I have to, you know, pull back the rug and sit on the floor. And I can do that for a little while, but it starts getting uncomfortable after a while. And just kind of moving furniture, it's just inconvenient. So then trying to pin baste on a table can be tricky because then you're bent over, or like I'm worried that I would gouge my table in the same way that I gouged the floor. under the rug, but it just kind of is not a real enjoyable process. You can just see, if you haven't already done it, why that would be, because this is taped down to the floor, for example, not where I can put my hand under it, like this nice little piece. So yeah, that's one of the yuck things about pin basting. The glue basting concept is that you are using Elmer's school glue, the washable, no-run, non-toxic glue, to do the same thing because it's a little bit easier to maneuver in theory. So I want to stop, and I'm just going to move this here just for a quick second, and let's talk about the actual glue. So this is it. This happens to be Elmer's brand, washable, no-run school glue, in the little squeeze bottle that most of us grew up with in our childhood. And this was long before effective glue sticks. So this is the one. And it really has to be this one, or this kind, meaning the washable kind. The reason it has to be this one, specifically with the word washable on it, is because we want it to wash out. That's so Captain Obvious, but it really is true. And Elmer's makes a lot of different glues in this exact same bottle that are not, in fact, washable. Ask me how I know. No, don't ask me how I know. So we need the one that says washable. Now, there are off-brands of this. I have not tried them, but I suspect they work just as well. If you're wondering what it is that makes it washable, the active ingredient, if you will, is PVA. And I looked that up, what PVA is, and now I can't remember it. So that's apparently how important my brain thinks that information is. But it's made with a water solvent. And so what happens once it gets used, it is still water soluble, meaning it washes out with water. And that's whether it's wet or dry. So that's kind of the whole point. And if you think about spray adhesive, I mean, it's just glue that will go in an aerosol form. Unlike the spray adhesive, which has overspray and sometimes a very strong smell, and we know it's probably not great for the environment. This is not any of those things. It's non-toxic, meaning, it's not toxic. So you can actually ingest it. I don't suggest that you do that, but it's not going to hurt you if, for example, you were to breathe it in, and it doesn't have fumes and all that good stuff. So I get the appeal, which is, of course, why I gave it the college try, because it's like, oh, well, that makes sense. And this is affordable, and you're not going through canisters, cans and cans of aerosol, nor having the kind of pain in the butt aspect of literally sometimes sitting on the floor, putting pins in your quilt. The first great thing about this is you don't have to buy it in this little bitty size. You can buy it in the gallon size. I had to check to make sure it was the gallon. So you can buy it at a lot of craft stores, or I bought mine at my local art supply store. Turns out that Hobby Lobby has an off-brand that is probably half the cost, which if I had known, I probably would have done that. But anyway, so they make it in this big container, and I learned this because my good friend Jennifer has a very artistic and creative granddaughter, and they do lots of craft projects that involve glue. So she was like, oh, well, that's easier, because I was talking about going through these little containers and how it seemed wasteful. And she's like, well, just get a big container and just refill your little one. Oh, so smart. The more you know. But this still, for me, made my hand fatigue. And so I was like, okay, so that's how I got on the journey. And now I'm sitting here talking about it. So I'm going to put my gown away and get back to where I was. So my first questions for myself, how can I make this a little bit easier on myself while still using the glue and the gallon jug? And I'm going to show you that real quick. So you need some specialty equipment for this. And the first is just a funnel of your choice. This one happened to come from IKEA in a bowl set that I've had for so long, I can't remember when we bought it. It just so happens, if you happen to have an IKEA in your area, they have a little happy yellow funnel that's 99 cents right now in your stores. But I just use my little red funnel, obviously my big gallon jug, and I thought I would try some different sorts of squeeze bottles to see if I could eliminate that hand crampy, hand fatiguey thing that came with this. And so let's start with the first one that works not. If you've ever been to a Subway and wanted mayonnaise, you know exactly what this is. Right on your Subway sandwich. I mean, that's what it is. And the beauty of this, and the reason I picked this, is you can pour the glue in from the top, and then this stays down, and the little silicone gauge that keeps it from, gooping out is on the bottom. And so the glue always stays where you're applying it, unlike this where you have to turn it upside down to get the glue there. So I thought this is going to be the one. And let me show you why this one is not the one. So it does come out once you kind of get it down in there. Where my pointer finger is, that's a lot of glue, folks. That right there is a whole lot of glue. That might represent the amount of glue that you need for a piece as big as my table. So it's a very thick wad of glue. And you might wonder how I know this. I actually did a glue-basted baby quilt and used these different ones that I tried, and I did not make any changes. If it did this, I just left it. And let me tell you, that level of glue, the needle will still go through it, just not smoothly or easily. So this would be a little on the much glue side, which while we're there, I tend to be someone who does too much. And I think we could actually even bring back that phrase, like, she does the most, or you're doing the most. I tend to do the most, just in case you needed that information. So I tend to do too much. So like if the shampoo bottle says use a dime size amount, I do not know what size that is in European or any worldly global currency, but a dime is a very small thing in America. I think palmful. So I just tend to, it's like I just kind of go overboard just by nature. I rarely go too little. If I'm going to go too one way or the other, it's always going to be too much. This falls into the too much category. And then unsurprisingly, I just went on and went with it when I did that. The next one is this one, which is just a good old, these are actually the same, by the way, but I could not stand it. I had to buy this because I call this French's hot dog mustard color. It's not yellow. It's French's hot dog mustard yellow. And it has this waitress on it, this like 1950s pinup tattoo or diner sort of girl on it. And I just thought that was great. So these are actually the same, and they have a 38 millimeter opening on them, if anyone needs to know. And I will tell you, I actually really liked this one because I could control the muchness. And so you can see that I can do a much, much, much thinner little, what do you call that? Ribbon. That's what I'm trying to say. Little thin ribbon. Sometimes that very first start has a little bit of a blob, which I'll get to that in a minute. So I really liked this one. Eventually, this one will get washed and put to use olive oil in my EVOO in our kitchen, and I will use this one just for the joy of it. But I did have to bring it out for that purpose. If you want to see the difference between this and this actual squeeze bottle from Elmer's, they're fair. Whoops. fairly similar. So to me, this round squeezy bottle was much more ergonomic and allowed me to have a little bit more control than this did. I don't know if it's because it's round or because it's taller or whatever. I end up making this motion. Wah, wah, wah. Whereas this one is squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. So I liked this one a lot better than this one. And I liked the fact that I can take this lid off and just really, if you just soak it in a little bit of warm soapy water and then rinse it out, it comes completely clean. Whereas even though this is a great concept where it's that self-closing and it's supposed to keep the glue from getting all globby down in the actual nozzle, globby and nozzle in the same sentence. It's supposed to work, but if you've ever been in an elementary school classroom, what you know is that at some point it gets blocked up and it's a pain. So learning experience here, this, unless I could get a far smaller opening and gasket, this one is a no-go because of the blob factor. But these are great. And I got mine at my local restaurant supply store. I happen to have a daughter who's a baker. And so we just went straight to the restaurant supply store and oohed and awed over all of the kitchen supply. And they have every size with every size opening. You can get them bigger than this. I'm sure they make them smaller, and you can probably pay 4 times as much if you go to a craft store. So, if you'd rather do that, you can definitely go to a craft store and buy something similar for a whole lot more. That was how I came up with that. And from now on, we'll be using, this guy for my actual application of the glue. So the next problem, and now throwing it back to our pin basting versus glue basting, is how much to use. And I've already alluded to the muchness, so we know I'm already inclined to do that. But there is no real guide out there. And very much like I said, the internet told me to do 2 to 4 inches of pin basting. There's not much out there in the way of prescripted, factual, rule-making statements like 3 ribbons per 8-inch square. That just doesn't exist, much as I wish it did. It's more like use your heart. Just do how you feel. How I feel, I need you to tell me how to do it, especially as a new quilter. So I'm here to tell you that the how you feel thing, you can use your brain to help nudge your feelings until you do have a sense of comfort about it. And here's how I suggest. If we were to draw a line between each of these pins, you would see this nice little zigzaggy line, right? And if you think about it, how much of this is actually attached, right? In the three layers, how much? Well, it turns out it's about 1/2 inch every 3 to 4 inches. So when I think of pin basting, I feel like this is solidly attached, but really it's just attached at one little spot, just at some level of frequency throughout the project. So if you're just starting and you're wondering how much to use and you have pin basted before, you could just visualize where you would put the pin and then use your glue to draw that line. So I could just draw my little line like this. But what I have found, and what others I think before me have found, is because the glue is going to make those ribbons, it's going to be actually attached in more places all across your quilt sandwich, both from the backing to the batting and from the batting to the quilt top. So you don't have to use as much as your internal muchness meter thinks you need to. I have a high internal muchness meter. So what I have found in doing this is you can use too much, and it's easy to do so, but it's actually hard to use too little. And so if you're going to go on one end of the muchness meter with regard to glue basting, really less is better because it doesn't take that much. I've never said the word much so many times in my whole life, but it really doesn't take a lot because you think about it, I could do a dot, imagine dot, 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 and that would be the equivalent of what I just did in pin basting, as opposed to making a ribbon with my glue like so, just a very thin stretch. And now I have covered all of that ground with that little bitty thin thread. And it will have covered the same ground as this section right here and more because it's connected all of those dots, if that makes sense. And then you think about it, the bigger the project, really the less you have to have overall because you're going to have it all glued top and bottom. And so you don't have to have as much glue as you did pins. So that's something to remember. And also, while we're at it, I do want to say, for those of you that have been quilting for lots and lots of years and have lots of experience in quilting and sewing versus some of us that have not had as much experience, I do think it really just depends on your comfort level with ease and quilting in general and how you know how to handle your fabric. So you may be like, oh my gosh, I would put one stripe across this entire 10-inch square. Whereas, maybe someone else does a lot. And really, there is no prescription for it. You can do it how you would like it. It doesn't keep your quilt sandwich any less stable than the pins. There's something about pins that to me, maybe it's because they're metal and sharp. I feel like it's going to make it so stable and that this will not be. It's actually better connected to each other and more stable when it's all said and done. So let me show you a couple of things I have learned for myself with actual application techniques. Okay, now again, this is not a full how to do the glue basting tutorial, but I want to show you some things that I have learned in doing this. So what I have before me is some batting strips that I have down. I have not actually stitched them together to make Franken batting. I will probably do so at some point later. But this was my test block for the Blizzard quilt, and I'm going to use this block as quilting practice. So this is a great way for me to show you. So what I would do, let's pretend, we'll have to use our imagination, that I have already attached the backing to my batting, and I'm getting ready to do my quilt top to the batting and backing. There are a couple of things that are going to be helpful, and especially for those of us that are wound up a little on the tight side. So the first thing for me was to find a way to attach my batting and backing to the surface that I'm working on. Now, this is not a big project, so I can do it right here sitting down. If it were a bigger project, I might use more of my table or my dining room table, and you can also do this on the floor. But I know myself, and I have watched myself do this. When I get ready to do the spreading and the smoothing, sometimes I get a little carried away, and the next thing I know, I have pushed my quilt top and everything off askew. So a great thing to use is these little plastic clamps. These are they're not killer hard to grip. We do have the like industrial strength because my husband has every tool under the sun, which is amazing. These are just little kind of inexpensive plastic clamps. They have them at Harbor Freight Tools for like 99 cents. And actually they have them in fun colors right now. So just saying. So you can just take these little inexpensive plastic clamps and clamp it to your table like so. And that will keep your project or your full quilt from shifting if you get to be an overzealous spreader like I am. If this is much like the squeezy bottle, if you don't have a lot of hand strength or if you have some limitations that way, it is just as easy to put a little piece of painter's tape. And it's kind of the same concept of pin basting. You just tape it down to your surface. And of course, if you have the, decent painter's tape, it shouldn't do anything to the surface of your table or sewing table or floor. So you can tape or clamp. I just like the clamps. I don't know why. Probably because I feel like it makes me feel handy to put the clamps. And then you're ready. And then that way, when you get to pushing, if you push too hard, back to the muchness, it's stable and not going anywhere. So that's a little tip. I've got my project taped down, and one of the things that I've noticed for myself is when I get ready to start one of the ribbons, a lot of times I'll get that blob of glue just at the beginning. And my other instinct is to not leave well enough alone. And I just naturally reach up to kind of smear it and make it not a blob, which then makes my hand sticky or my finger sticky. And then now I'm needing to have a nice clean hand to squeeze my squeeze bottle, and I've got glue on my hand. So what I've started doing when I get ready is I get a wet cloth, and that's for both my hand as I am prone to stick my fingers in the glue, and a wet paintbrush. So as I am applying my glue, if I have one of those little blobbies like this, then I can take my little paintbrush and just kind of spread that out just a little, anywhere that I feel like it might have gotten kind of thick. Usually for me, it's in the beginning of a ribbon. And I have also learned that if I will not panic, generally a good idea when one is working on projects, to not panic and just keep going, because the glue will start to flow out in that ribbon. And if you just keep moving, it'll be fine. But if you stop to try to fix it, then now when you start again, you might have another blob. So this works great. And because it being the glue is washable, you can just wash this out with warm soapy water when it's done. Same for if you were to put your finger in it to make that same smear, you can use your wet cloth to wipe your hands off as you're going. And so then now I'm going to do exactly what I said and do my spreading. Now, you'll notice that I started off in the margin where my batting has overhang. And I actually did that on purpose because I have noticed that if I try to only go where the quilt top is, like if I were to start right here, I don't start right here. I start too far in, and then I end up with my edges not attached. So if I just start in the margin and end in the margin, two things happen. The blob is typically not underneath the quilt top, and I have a line of something that goes all the way to the edge, which for me is like putting that pin basting one pin right in the corner or right on the edge, because you always have that piece that wants to fold back. So that tends to work for me. And then while we're here, I have noticed at times that if I'm using a thin fabric or a very porous fabric like linen, the glue will come through from the batting up into the cotton or linen, and then sometimes all the way through. When I initially did that, I had it's fine. It's fine. It washes out. But if it does that from your batting down to your backing, you may notice when you fold it back that your table has gotten a little bit of that glue residue, which is also a very good reason to have the wet cloth. It will not damage, to my knowledge, most furniture tops. We have just a wooden dining room table with a varnish on the top. And because it's water soluble glue, you can just wipe it up. So don't let that dismay you. And again, I say, if you end up with one of those blobby places, I had a blob the size of my thumb on the most recent quilt that I made. And though it was not enjoyable to watch the needle try to go through it, it did do it, and it was fun. And so the thinner, the better. You don't have to do every little spot everywhere like I tried to do the first several times I did this. And again, you can see, like, here's my hand, here's the glue. You can see where it's going. And oh no, that's more than 4 inches apart. However, it's connected that entire way. So I'm going to come along here and do this next row, and then I've picked up anywhere that I've missed. And if it's in your comfort level, you can do, 6 inches, 8 inches apart, and that's where you measure it with your heart. It really just depends on your level of experience and comfort and confidence. And nobody can tell you that, unfortunately, which is one of the great things about quilting and one of the hard things about quilting. So this is my linen block of the same design, just made smaller. And I'm going to be making this into a pillow. And I wanted to show you this specifically. This particular quilt top, if you will, has all of the seams between the rows pressed to open. And if you have done this, sometimes these little open seams want to close in on themselves. And if I was going to glue base this, as you may know, it would get folded back. I would apply my glue and then work this through like this. But in that process, sometimes these seams, as they grab the glue, they want to kind of close in on themselves and not stay open. I've had that happen, and it, has the little bump where the seam would be if it gets turned the wrong way between the batting and the quilt top. So what I wanted to show you, and kind of the problem solve for that, is instead of putting the batting down and putting the glue on the batting, you can put your quilt top down and put the glue on the back of the quilt top and use your batting as the thing that you fold over and smooth. And the appeal of that, and I'm not going to do it because I'm actually not ready to glue this just yet, but I would trace along here with my glue, putting a little bit of glue along that openly pressed seam right there. And then when I go to do my batting, so let's say this is folded back like so, and I do my glue along like this. When I push my batting over the quilt top, the seams don't get folded in on themselves because they're flat lying with glue on them. It's the batting that's getting the push across the fabric. So that is an appeal to me, and one of the ways that you can kind of get around that if you've had that experience. I've had a couple. I did the Fibonacci quilt for QuiltCon. I did as a glue basting, and there were a couple of times that as I was folding the quilt top back onto the batting, the seams got turned and there was a little bit of a lump there. If you found that to be true for you as well, instead of putting the batting down, you just put your quilt top down right side down, wrong side up, and glue directly onto your quilt top. And again, it does just come out in the wash. So in this case, when I get ready to do that, I will do exactly that. And the glue will go all the way through this linen because it's such an open weave, and I will have to wipe off my table, but I'll have the confidence of knowing that I can feel those seams and make sure they stay nice and flat as I attach my batting to the glue-basted quilt top. So I did a little practice piece. It's a little baby quilt sandwich, mini quilt sandwich with 2 jelly roll strips that I made from shirts. And I wanted to show you, I did kind of a heavy application on this because I wanted you to see, if you have not done quilt basting for yourself and just had the question, what does it look like? You can see where I just did the swirly right through here. It is visible in some places, and I let it be thick on purpose. I can feel it. There's a little bit of a lump there. And right here and right here, it just so happened that there was heavy glue on both sides. So that has dried. This one actually may not even be fully dried. This one has dried a little bit darker and a little bit thicker, but you can still move it. It's not so stiff that I can't work it through my fingertips. And then once I start sewing, the needle will go straight through that. So to give you an idea of how long that took, even with that heavy glob, I did this example at about 9 o'clock this morning, and it's now been several hours. So it's been about 5 hours, and it is now really totally dry. I could absolutely quilt this little piece if I wanted to. Most of the pieces were dry within 30 minutes to an hour, but because I had some of those heavy glops, it took a little bit longer. So if you have that issue, and I did a baby quilt with, previously mentioned, baby quilt with lots of globbies. I actually just left it out overnight to dry and was able to start quilting the next day. So it doesn't take long if you do the little application, the reasonable amount of application. If you get a little heavy-handed with your squeeze bottle, it may take some time for it to dry, and the just drying overnight is the way around that. If you still have it out, I actually did a little Google check. That PVA glue, so the washable Elmer's glue, it doesn't matter how long it has been dried into the fabric, it's always water soluble. What that means, practically speaking, is you can glue baste a project and leave it perhaps indefinitely before you're ready to quilt it. It is possible to separate the pieces, the fabric from the batting. A lot of times, though, a little bit of the batting will stick still to the glue. So just if you wonder, and if you realize you've glued it wrong, you can wet it and get it to loosen back up and then let it air dry and either re-glue, or if you've gone, wait a minute, I don't like this at all, you can just wet it and take it apart, which is the beauty of the washable glue basting. So hopefully that will take some of the yuck factor out of glue basting for you and give you some solutions if you've had some of these same problems as me. Number one among them, squeeze bottle this size is the way to go. So I hope this has been helpful for you. I'm Kathy Martin. This is the Catbird Quilts. Thanks so much for watching.